It is time for our Wednesday conversation with the one and only Chip Patterson, CBSSports.com, Cover3Podcast moderator, my friend. How are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. The SEC does their meetings with more flavor than the ACC, although the ACC gave them a run for their money this time with Florida State's.
Yeah, but we didn't have podiums. They have a podium. They have press conferences.
Yeah.
They treat the spring meetings like most conferences treat their media days.
Right.
And then SEC treats its media days like it's Bonnaroo, where we've got
Mardi Gras
and we've got fans.
Right.
And you come down and you give the high fives, and it's a 4-day event.
Yep.
No, it just means it. I've heard
it just means more. Say it.
It just means more.
There you go. That's Kirby Smart. All right, so I want to play a couple of clips from Nick Saban, and I want to just kind of get our conversation going, and then if we have time, we'll talk about whatever Eli Drinkwitz was talking about in relation to gambling, which had nothing to do with gambling. All right, so I want to go to the last one I have listed here, Graham. This is Nick Saban talking about the profits and potentially making players employees.
Well, I just think that, I have no problem with that. I mean, unionize it, make it like the NFL. I mean, if it's going to be the same for everyone, I think that's better than what we have now, because what we have now is we have some states and some schools in some states that are investing a lot more money in terms of managing their roster than others, and I think this is going to create a real competitive disadvantage for some in the future, and it's also going to create an imbalance in competitive nature of the sport, which that's not good for the sport. Everything they do in the NFL is to create what? Parity. So, and if they could have everybody going into the 17th week of the season at 8-8, that would be like a dream for the NFL. Because every fan would be watching their team to see if they get in the playoffs. Well, you think there's disparity in college football right now? There's going to be a lot more in the future.
Did Nick really say that this was going to create an imbalance? Chip?
You mean the man who won 6 national championships in 12 years? 130 teams compete for a title, supposedly, and one man at one program won the thing every other year. Yeah, that was the person who came out here talking about imbalance. But what was unique to me was the double meaning of how much you are investing in managing your roster, because that hits on 2 levels. And I kind of want to make sure that we unpack that for the audience, because yes, it does mean what you might think it means in terms of managing a unofficial payroll, a payroll that isn't called a payroll, how much money you are investing in your NIL operation to be able to not only get people to your program, but keep them in your program, because 2 times a year, all the other programs are sniffing around your roster, knocking on your door, trying to pluck your best players, offer them NIL opportunities they might not be getting. But he's also talking about what I like to call the polo shirts. You know the polo shirts? The polo shirts are when you look at the staff photo.
Yeah.
You know, you're flipping through the media guide, and you can name, probably your head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, maybe 2 or 3 position coaches, 11 position coaches, and head coach and all. So why are there 45 people in polos in the staff photo? Because when it comes to managing your roster, it is also about your scouting department. It's also about the people whose only job it is to comb everyone else's roster so you can find out who you want to go pluck off someone else's roster. And not every program can afford to do it, but a program like Alabama can, a program like Georgia can. And that's the investment that he's talking about here, where you're just not going to be able to have the resources to keep up not only with a payroll that isn't a payroll, but with the scouting that you need to be able to have all the information to have an edge there.
You're talking about the analysts, the air quote analysts. Here's the thing about this, and Nick had talked about how the colleges or the athletic departments invest every single dollar back into the programs, which Graham, if you could isolate that clip where we talked about investing everything back in, I want Chip to hear it. But before, just talk about it real quick. Because I think that's kind of a lie. That's dishonest because they waste more money than they invest back. Maybe not more money, but they waste a fair amount of that money on unnecessary things. Or rather than have a normal coaching staff, you now have double the size of a coaching staff because, well, we got to spend this money somewhere. So that guy just lost his job as the offensive coordinator for whatever team. Let's bring him in here. Let's pay him $150,000 as an analyst because we can and we have that money and we're just investing it. I get it. But those jobs, while not unnecessary, would become they wouldn't be there if they ultimately had to spend the money on players.
You're telling me that Cliff Kingsbury, former NFL coach Cliff Kingsbury, who is now just kind of a floating polo shirt in the USC facility,
right?
You're telling me that's a good use of money? You're telling me that that's not Lincoln Riley just throwing a bone to his friend?
Sure, exactly
with
right.
A potential six-figure salary? Yeah, you're reinvesting every cent. Where? That's right. The good follow-up.
They're not. Here, by the way, here's the clips. It's just so everybody can hear what Nick Saban had to say.
We reinvest every cent that gets made into non-revenue sports, to scholarships, to a lot of things that create a lot of opportunity for a lot of people, which is really, really good. So we're not talking about the same thing. It's not really a business. It's revenue producing.
He did say that college football is not really a business.
Listen, he did pull out. He dropped his experience card. He said, when I was the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, the Dolphins were owned by Wayne Huizenga, and he took a profit, and he chose to reinvest, that profit however he saw it fit. But there is a difference here in terms of, again, I'm only just throwing some credence. I get where Nick's coming from in saying, comparing the business operations of an athletic department to an NFL franchise, we are talking about apples and oranges just a little bit.
Of course.
Nick Saban came out here and said unionize it. And Nick Saban doesn't seem opposed to the idea of paying players, creating salary caps, and moving college football forward in a way where it becomes a semi-professional league. And it's interesting because that would allow everybody else to be able to find ways to close the gap with a program that has had the number 1, number 2, or number 3 recruiting class for 9 years in a row. The talent accumulation at Alabama is unlike anything that we have seen over a long stretch of time. They just don't have they don't have 3 stars, Adam. We talk about the solid in-state 3 stars that the programs across the great state of North Carolina. We got a lot of great talent in this state, and a lot of the evaluation process for North Carolina, NC State, Duke, and Wake Forest is finding that guy who maybe just doesn't have that height, weight, speed yet, or just needs everything a little bit fine-tuned. Being able to identify that 3-star is the lifeblood of some of those programs in the mid-ranks of the Power 5. Alabama has 4-star long snappers.
Yep.
Their long snappers are not even 3 stars. It's bananas when you look at the talent rankings of that roster. And so I thought that was interesting. Nick Saban isn't clearly near the end of his career. He has given his opinion. He will not be around to see what it looks like.
All right. Let me just throw 2 quick things. First of all, I mean, he's right in a technical sense that they're not businesses. They are nonprofits, right? You're not supposed to show a profit in the athletic department. That's why they invest every cent back into the program, because they have to. And I understand why they invested frivolously into football, because football is the moneymaker for the entire athletic department. So the more money that they can create based on football, they can maybe throw a few more dollars at some of the other sports. But clearly, with all of the money that they're bringing in, which they are clearly excessively spending on things that they don't really need, could be used in other sports. But let me. Because this is the way I feel. I said this earlier. Nick Saban says that he is in favor of the players getting paid, getting or being employees or unionizing. I don't believe any of that for a single second. Every time I hear a coach talk about how in favor he is, it just sounds to me like, man, I really wish it was like it used to be, where the university can make all this money and the players didn't know any better. How crazy is that for me to think?
I think I'm going to tell a story that Nick Saban told a group of Alabama boosters. Okay. Nick Saban told a group of Alabama boosters that there was an offensive lineman who was on last year's team, and that he approached the coaching staff and he wanted X number of dollars in NIL money, and he wanted his girlfriend to get into law school. And that's what it was going to take for him to stick around, or else he was hitting the transfer portal. You know what Nick Saban doesn't have to deal with if we have unionization and a salary cap? Getting somebody's girlfriend into law school. That things are so, again, like as you and I have discussed before, there was a voice that said there's going to be unintended consequences. Yeah. There's going to be unintended consequences. And my response was always, okay, well, let's see what they are. Let's address them, and let's continue to, let's take some bruises along the way to being able to ride this thing. And I think that when Nick Saban is saying that here in May of 2023, he is saying that because he sees that as a fast way to eliminate a lot of the extra noise around his players and his team, and a lot of the effort that it has to be put in by a coaching staff just to be able to tell a kid that he's getting lied to, or just to be able to drum up the funds that you need if you do think that this is a player that is, worth reinvesting in. I think that that's where Nick Saban is coming from. Unionizing or professionalizing the way that players are compensated would eliminate a lot of the headaches that have come with the current NIL environment at the highest levels.
But, I mean, in general, do you think there are many coaches who are in favor of their players getting paid?
No. I would say that you're hearing the voice of, again, someone who is at the highest levels of the sport with the most talented rosters in the toughest recruiting battles for players that are going to the NFL. The Alabama locker room is mostly made up of NFL players.
Yeah.
He's around a different type of athlete, a different type of college football player. And I just think it doesn't take long to drop off a cliff and get to something that is a little bit less professional, at least in terms of the way that things are handled throughout the locker room and around the building. And so I would say that most college football coaches are probably in the other camp.
See, I'm sure there are some who are definitely like, wow, I mean, this industry creates so many millions of dollars that the athletes should be getting part of that. It doesn't mean that the athlete should be making $5 million a year. And you and I have talked about this, always feel like the total numbers have been, amounts of money. Eli Drinkwitz saying that, the players are making more NIL money than his brother-in-law, the pediatrician who saves lives. A life-saving pediatrician has to be making a lot of money.
Pediatricians don't know what to do on 3rd and 7. Okay, pediatricians can't set the edge. Pediatricians don't have the notebook that tells you what to do when you're 4th down and 7 coming from the 35-yard line. All right, listen. Yeah. Pediatricians know when to go for 2 and when to chase points and when not to.
They have the card. The pediatricians have the card. They understand that. Because I think if these coaches were more pro-player rights, they would be more thoughtful about it. They wouldn't always go back to, well, we need a salary cap, or we wouldn't be comparing things to the National Football League. They would actually act like people who are in favor of their players getting something. Just like, I think we talked about this last week, possibly. What went on with and I have no idea where that discussion draft letter is at this stage, but about protecting players' NIL rights, it's the exact opposite. I don't think any of these people are genuine when they say we want players to get a part of this. I just think they want it the way it used to be because it was easier.
I think the coaches were able to not agree, but the coaches, when NIL was first introduced, there was a very simple way to sell it. And that is that their classmates, their students can leave campus and go make money based on their talents, who they are, and that does not preclude them from any of their other on-campus activities. The athletes should be able to do that as well. And I think that coaches were like, okay, you know what? That makes sense. It's probably been a little bit unfair. And then it's just sort of spun to the point where, and it's so funny, Eli Drinkwitz, the state of Missouri has just recently put in legislation that allows an athlete to start getting NIL in high school.
Yeah.
Like,
there's one coming in North Carolina.
He should be one of the ones that's on the forefront of this. And in fact, Eli Drinkwitz himself tweeted, quote, game changer when that law was passed.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I mean, like, forget comparing your own salary to your brother-in-law. You know, forget that aspect of it.
Sure,
By the
Eli
way,
saved a life or two.
In the same clip, Eli Drinkwitz, who I lovingly call the Alpha Nerd.
I love him. He's great.
A nickname that Barton Simmons came up with a long time ago, because he's like the guy that just is a bully, but he's like a bully on the chalkboard. You know, like he one-ups you, slams the chalk down. So he's the Alpha Nerd. The Alpha Nerd also came out and he was like, I mean, I like to play blackjack. And I was like, checks out. Eli Drinkwitz is a number card counter. He's got the numbers in his mind. He's probably been banned from blackjack tables for winning too much. You know, it is very interesting to hear from all these coaches. And while we made fun of the SEC for blowing this out with all these press conferences, it's interesting to pick their brain when they're not in season, because, you know, we get a wide array of responses that give us some insight into what the coaches at some of the top jobs in America are thinking.
All right. Next week will be Chipolytics. Is that fair? Because I know you had sent me. I've already started in on the Chipolytics, and then Nick Saban and Eli Drinkwitz talked, and we had to get to that. Chip Patterson. So Chipolytics next week. Is that fair?
Oh, I'll be ready to rock.
All right, man. I appreciate your time.
Sounds good. Y'all be well.
Chip.